Hi chess enthusiasts, Francis here again. Today we are going to talk about our part 3 about King's Indian formation against the English opening. So let's recap our variation. We have c4, knight f6, knight c3, g6, g3, bishop g7, bishop g2, castle, d4, d6, so the King's Indian formation, knight to f3, c5, and in our part 1, we discussed about what black should do if white castles. And in part 2, what black should do if white moves to d5. Here in part 3, we will discuss about the move d takes c5. So after d takes c5, we have black recapturing back the pawn. So here, white has so many options, but we will discuss first queen takes d8. After queen takes d8, we have rook takes d8, and here white has two good moves. We have bishop to e3, and I'm recommending knight to a6 instead of bishop to e6. So knight to a6. After knight to e5, we retreat our knight to e8, threatening that knight on e5. After f4, rook to b8. Then after rook to d1, I recommend here that we take the rook. Rook takes d1. So king takes d1, and we have knight to d6. So here, if white supports his pawn on c4 by moving b3, we have b6 in order to relieve the pressure on the diagonal or the light squared diagonal. Knight to c6 is not a threat because we have b takes c3. The knight on c3 is hanging. So his move may be queen to c1, and we simply move bishop to b7. He moves king to d2. We may make the move bishop to b7. So let's go back. If white moves his bishop to e3, this is a very dangerous move, which resulted to many loss for black. I suggest knight to c6. Then again, after queen takes d8, simply have rook takes d8, and after white captures our pawn on c5, simply maneuver our bishop, threatening also the c4 pawn. And after the white's knight retreats, we have knight to d7. Play could continue. Bishop takes c6, knight takes c6. So if white takes our knight on c6, our main reply is not to take back that bishop, but to take with our knight the bishop on c5. So this is comfortable for black already. So, if instead of taking or capturing our queen, white made a move, bishop takes c5, our response is queen to a5. And here, after bishop to e3, we have also bishop to e6. After castling, we can take now the pawn. Bishop takes c4. And this is fine for black. If instead of capturing, white simply castles, I recommend knight to g5. Again, bishop to e6 results to many losses for black, so I recommend knight to g5 here. So knight to g5, again, white may take our queen, and our main move is rook takes d8. After bishop takes c5, we do the bishop maneuver again, bishop to e6. And after kicking our knight h3, we move it to knight f6. After rook a to d1, we have knight to d7. Again, it's a good maneuver, threatening the bishop. If bishop retreats to d4, we have bishop takes c4, regaining our pawn. If instead of taking our queen, black here captures our pawn on c5, we have the maneuver queen to a5. After bishop to e3, we have bishop to e6. After white castles, we have bishop takes c4, regaining our pawn. So let's go back to our variation. Here, if white moves his bishop to f4, our reply is queen to b6. Since white hasn't castled yet, knight to a4 is no good for white because we have queen to b4 check. And after bishop to d2, we can take the pawn on c4. And if white threatens our queen by a knight to e5, we have queen to e6. And after knight to d3, threatening our pawn on c5, we have knight to e4. And after knight takes e5, c5, we have knight takes c5. And after knight takes c5, we have queen to b6, which is good for black. So white would respond with queen to c1. We have knight to c6, and after white castles, we have bishop to f5. After rook to e1, we have knight b4, which is comfortable for black. White cannot kick our knight because we have the threat knight to c2. So he would probably go knight to b4. But here, we should not continue with our threat, but instead retreat our bishop to d7. Then after a3, we have knight to c6. After knight to f3, we have knight to d4. And the resulting exchange here is good for black. After knight takes d4, we have c takes d4. Knight to d5, we have knight takes d5. And after c takes d5, we have rook f to c8, which is good for black. After bishop takes d5, we have bishop to c6. After c5, we have queen to a6. And black is very fine here. Next, we have bishop to g5. After bishop to g5, I recommend knight to c6. And after queen takes d8, we have rook takes d8. After knight d2, again, can have our maneuver here. h6. After bishop to e3, we have the bishop maneuver to e6. After bishop takes c5, our knight goes to d7. As our pattern, we have bishop takes c6. And again, instead of taking the bishop on c6, we take the bishop on c5. Finally here, what will happen if white simply castles? So here, since we were the ones who took back on c5, it was white who took our c5 pawn, and it's not us who took the d4 pawn. I recommend the move, instead of queen to a5, as in our previous video, I recommend knight to c6. And here, we can discuss the move bishop to e3. After bishop to e3, I recommend again knight to g4. This is just a transposition on the first, and in what we have discussed previously. But let's recap. What will happen if white takes our queen? We have rook takes d8, bishop takes c5, bishop to e6. And after h3, we have knight to f6. After d1, we have knight to d7. After bishop to d4, we regain our pawn. The critical line here in bishop to e3 is bishop takes c5. I recommend queen to a5. And after knight to a4, we begin our series of moves. After bishop to e6, they may continue h3, and here we have rook a to d8. After queen to c2, we have b6, kicking the bishop. The bishop may go to a3. We have here knight g to e5. After knight takes ge5, knight takes ge5. White may be happy to capture our pawn on e7, but we have this good move, rook to d2. White cannot go to b1 because the knight is hanging. So instead, his move is queen to b3, and after queen to b3, we take the pawn on c5 by our bishop. After queen to a3, we have bishop takes e2. After bishop to b4, so this is a long sequence of moves, we have rook to d3. We will trick white into taking our rook. After rook, queen takes d3, we have knight takes d3, and after bishop takes a5, we have bishop takes f1, and after bishop takes f1, we have knight takes b2. And here, the correct reply by white is knight takes b5. After a takes b5, white should retreat his bishop to b4. But if he mistakenly captures the bishop, the pawn on b6, then we have the double threat. after knight to a4, we threaten white's rook and white's bishop, and the bishop cannot be saved. So after rook to b1, we have rook to b8. So what will happen if after rook a to d8, instead of moving to c2, white moves to b3. So we have here b6. After the bishop retreats to a3, we have knight g to e5, knight takes e5, and we have knight to d4. Again, this is a long sequence of moves. After knight to c6, threatening our queen, we also threaten white's queen. So we take white's queen. White takes our black queen. After our knight takes the rook on a1, white has several options. If it takes our pawn on e7, we have the response b takes e5. Our rooks will not move, but instead will capture the knight on a5. After bishop takes d8, we have rook takes d8, and after rook takes a1, we have bishop takes c4. And this is fine for black. Here, if white made the move knight to c6, we simply retreat our knight to c2, and white has two options. If takes with the bishop, this time we move our rook to d2, and the resulting exchange is favorable for black. If white captures our rook, we have the response rook takes d8, and after bishop takes e7, we have rook to d7, threatening the bishop, and after bishop to g5, we have h6. After bishop to f4, we have knight to d4, and after knight to c3, we have bishop takes c4. b3 is not good because we have knight takes e2, and after king to h2, simply capture the bishop on f4. And here, if for some reason white does not retreat his bishop to a3, but instead moves his knight to g5, we simply take the bishop, b takes c5. Then after knight takes e6, we have rook to b8, threatening the queen. After the queen moves to c2, we have knight to b4. And here, we could have a repetition. If queen to b3, we simply capture, f takes e6. And after white capture our knight on g4, we have knight to a6. If the queen goes to d1, we have rook f d8. Then after queen to c2, we can repeat our moves. Knight to b4, knight to a6, then knight to b4 again. Let's go back to move 8. Sorry, let's go back to move 9. If after white castles and after our reply knight to c6, if white moves his bishop to f4, so our response now is not queen to b6, because white has already castled. Knight to a6 will knight to a4 will be nasty for black. So I recommend here knight to h5. And if white captures our queen, simply move rook takes d8. And after bishop to g5, we have bishop to e6. After rook ac1, we have bishop takes c4, regaining our pawn back. So if white threatens our bishop, knight to d2, we have bishop to a6 and b takes c6. The bishop capturing our c6 is not good, because we simply have b takes c6, and after knight d to e4, we have bishop takes c3 also. After knight takes c3, we have knight to f6, and after b takes f6, we have e takes f6. After fd1, this is results to equality. If instead of capturing our queen, white moves his bishop to e6, we have simply b6, and believe it or not, the knight on c6 is not can be supported by our bishop to b2. So play may continue. Queen to c1, bishop to b7, and after rook to d1, we have queen to e8. After bishop to h6, we have rook to d8. Here, knight to b5 is no good, because we have rook takes d1, and after queen takes d1, we have bishop to takes h6, which hangs the bishop on h6. After rook takes d8, we have queen takes d8, and after bishop takes d7, we have knight takes d7, which is fine for black. If instead of retreating to e3, white goes to bishop to g5, we have bishop to e6, and after knight to d5, we have knight to f6, and after knight to e1, we have rook to c8, which is comfortable for black. Finally, we have bishop to g5. This is much easier to handle. After bishop to e6, white may play knight to d2. We simply move our queen to c8, and after queen to a4, we have bishop to h3. That's it, guys. I hope you win many blitz games. Bye.